Hello, welcome to the 11:10 session. We're going to get started so we can get here to lunch on time. Thanks for joining us in track 4. I'm Nikki Gio with the City of Vancouver, Washington. I'm the moderator today for this session. The title of the session is Utilizing Asset Management Software for IDDE Tracking and Reporting. We're going to have a 20-minute presentation followed by a Q&A. I want to remind you that the session is being recorded, not the Q&A, just the actual session. Please turn off or silence your cell phones. That would be very helpful. Our speaker today is Melissa Ivancevich from the City of Shoreline, Washington. She's going to talk about their program there in surface water quality. She is a chair of the Stormwater Group's IDDE subgroup. Welcome, Melissa.
Thank you. So yeah, just a little bit more about me. I've been with the City of Shoreline for a little over 4 years as a surface water quality specialist. Prior to that, I was in the private sector for nearly 7 years. And at the City of Shoreline, I help implement programs to meet the city's municipal NPDES Permit. And that includes the IDDE program, the Illicit Discharge Detection and Elimination program, which I'll be talking about here today, and also the water quality monitoring program and our private facility inspection program. So this presentation is aimed at sharing our Shoreline's experience in utilizing Cityworks as our asset management software for the last 6 years. So I'll talk specifically about how we've set up Cityworks in order to input our IDDE data into the system, how we export and report that data, and how both of those are going to change slightly as we implement the new permit coming online this summer. Various ways you can analyze and map that data, and how you can use that data that you've been collecting. And then question and answer at the end. So for those of you who are not familiar with the City of Shoreline, we are located just north of Seattle, 12.3 square miles, and population of over 53,000 people. And Shoreline implemented Cityworks as its asset management system in 2013, and the surface water utility was actually the first division within the city to implement Cityworks at that time. The implementation in 2013 also happened to coincide with the current NPDES permit going into effect. So the city decided to take a proactive approach and began voluntarily implementing the Department of Ecology's IDDE tracking form through Cityworks. So Cityworks works with a GIS platform, and that contains all of our mapped assets. It started with our surface water assets and continued to expand across the other divisions in Public Works, and eventually it expanded to all of our departments within the city. It's based on a 3-pronged system of service requests, work orders, and inspections, and I'm going to talk about all of those as they relate to our IDDE program. And the map that you see on this screen is actually a snapshot of what the map looks like on the Cityworks app on an iPad. And so the little yellow guy, one of them is highlighted as it's a water quality service request, and the little red wrenches show where there are work orders that's zoomed in and where City Hall is within Shoreline. So Cityworks, when you first open it, it's going to be blank. Each user gets to customize their workspace as it works best for them. So I have mine set up with, it might be a little hard to read, but I have it set up with IDDE, private or commercial facility inspections, and water quality sampling. Those are my 3 tabs that I set up for myself. And so I'm going to focus on IDDE today. And what you do is you create inboxes for yourself. Mine on my IDDE tab is my open IDDE service requests, my open IDDE work orders, my potential illicit connections, and this is based on a safe search on illicit connection on an inspection as opposed to a service request or work order, and then my open illicit connection work orders. So this is where I can track what is my investigations as they're going forward. For service requests, there's, for all of them, for both service requests and work orders, there's a submit to drop down. For our service requests, we have it so it's automatically populated with the appropriate person within the city that service request should go to. So for our water quality, which is mainly our IDDE service requests, you can change the submit to, so you'll see that we have this IDDE user that actually goes to multiple people within the city, and then you can update it if you're the one taking on that service request, update it to yourself, and that actually will generate an email as well, so that way you're notified via email that a report has come in. Work orders we don't currently have set up to be automatically, you don't receive an email when that comes in. That's something that we may change moving forward. And for the potential illicit connections, that's based on an inspection search, and so that's not an automatic notification. So that's where this inbox really becomes key in having it set up so that way you're aware of what's going on. So looking at what our IDDE service request looks like. This is where we're getting the initial report, whether it be through our spill hotline, from an internal referral from another agency. The city also utilizes C-Click-Fix, which is a citizen-facing public portal where they can report any issues that they find in the city. And we've set it up so that way C-Click-Fix will automatically feed into Cityworks, and it'll populate a service request based on the questions and answers that the citizen is filling out within C-Click-Fix. When, excuse me, when the initial report is coming in and they're filling out the service request, there's a series of 3 questions that they ask, which is what is the problem, what is the type of material, and where is that material being discharged or dumped? And then that question and answer is populated into the comments field within the service request. We also collect location information, and since it's based on a GIS platform, we're able to geolocate that location. We also collect caller information when we're taking in the initial report and putting it into the service request. And then we're also marking if the Department of Ecology has already been notified when we're getting the report. And this is actually a custom field set up on the service request, so whenever this water quality service request is created, it automatically adds this custom field for the water quality service request. And a newer addition to our service request is this restitution field. So this will help us in our damage restitution process for indicating if there is no liability, a possible liability, a definite third-party liability, or a city claim, which we typically, hopefully won't encounter in an IDDE where a city asset has caused damage to a private property. And just one additional note on a service request, you can only enter your internal labor. So this is the very basic beginning steps of the investigation. So then what you can do is create a work order, an investigation work order off of the service request to do the further investigation. And if you haven't already created the work order, you'll have the option right here on the service request to create that work order, and you choose the template. This one, the work order has already been created. This specific example, this happened last summer in 2018. A city employee observed some car washing activities from a private property, and it was impacting the city's drains, so he called it in. So we can look at what that investigation looked like. So you create that work order, and it's lengthy, so this is like the first part of the work order, and then I'll show you what the bottom part looks like as we walk through this example. So it's our illicit discharge investigation work order. When you create the work order, anything that's put into the comments field on the service request, that Q&A section and any additional comments will automatically be pulled over into that work order in the comments field. We also have the same location information and the restitution field. So as you're going through the investigation, if it goes from a possible liability to a definite third-party liability, you can indicate it here on the work order. And then it also has a link back to the service request, so everything is linked. Just like the custom fields on the service request, we have a custom field set up on our work order, and this is really the bulk of the investigation information. So for this incident, I mentioned that it was a staff referral. We have that there. We have that with some additional explanation about what he was observing in the field. We have the source tracing method. We have the explanation of the property source type and the correction elimination methods and kind of the timeline that we were following during this investigation. We can also add assets. So we have the two city catch basins that were affected. And then this is the bottom half of that work order. You can then spawn inspections on those assets. So again, everything is linked within this system. And I'm going to show you on the next slide what the inspection template looks like. You can also create a child work order. So for this instance, we don't have a Vector truck, so we called our on-call contractor to come out and Vector the two impacted catch basins. So we were able to create a child work order off of this main work order for that Vector service. And you can have attachments. So we have pictures of what happened in the response that was taken. We also have the IRTS report attached here. You can also attach these to service requests as well. And then we have the letter that we sent to the responsible party attached to the work order. You could also attach a contractor invoice or something like that as well. But that information is also captured in the ELM, the equipment, labor, and materials. So we have all of our trucks entered into the system as equipment, so we're able to quantify our vehicle usage. We can put both internal and external labor costs in here. And we can also quantify our materials, so what the per unit cost was of those spill pads that were deployed during this response. And this is, again, key in that damage restitution process. If you're going to have to go out to the third party to get money back from them, you can quantify all of those things. So looking specifically at what that inspection looks like, it's actually a very simple inspection form when it comes to IDDE. It's just, is pollutant present, yes or no? And so very quick and easy to fill out when you're in the field. We also go to the details tab on the inspection, and you have a link back to the main work order. So again, everything is linked back. For our illicit connection process, the main difference between illicit discharge and illicit connection is that illicit detection investigation is typically spawned off a service request coming in. Illicit connections are typically instigated by one of our O&M inspections. That's our screening method. And so we have, as one of the questions on the inspection form for our O&M inspections is there a potential illicit connection, yes, no? So I had in my inbox a safe search set up for any time that this is populated. So I have to make sure, because I don't get an email notification for this, I have to make sure during the O&M inspection season, I'm going into Cityworks on a daily basis and checking my inbox to see if there's some sort of investigation I need to do. Just like a service request, anything entered into the comments field of the inspection form will also be pulled into the work order once you generate that work order off of the inspection form. So you go to the details tab of the inspection, and you can create a work order and have it linked back to that inspection. And once you've created that work order, you'll then have that link. So this is going to change a little bit as we implement the new permit this summer. We're going to do away with that custom fields on the work order because it's going to get much lengthier as we have to collect and report some additional information. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a general IDDE inspection form template that's going to be automatically added to every IDDE work order as it's created. So it'll look a little bit like this. It won't have that catch basin information on the right-hand side because it'll just be a general IDDE inspection. And it may look something a little bit like this. It's still a work in progress with our IT department. We won't have that pollutant present yes, no question, but we'll have the series of questions that we need to answer and the answers below. And it's gonna be a hierarchical or branching process, so that way we can not have too long of a form. So when you have your question, you have your options to choose from, and then once you select that, it'll branch out and ask you further questions. For instance, if you reported to IRTS, you'll select that button, and then you'll be able to input that IRTS number. So how do you get this data out of your system into ecology when it's time to report? It's actually a really simple process as it is now. You just do a search on your work orders. You put in the parameters you want to search for, that you're wanting to export your illicit discharge investigation and illicit connection elimination work orders, information from your work orders. You put in the time frame. I did a search on the calendar year 2017 here. But you also have to make sure you choose what fields you want visible in that search. And because we currently have that custom fields on the work order, we have to make sure we go to that tab and select those fields that we want visible, since that's containing the bulk of our investigation information. You run the search and you get your list of work orders that happened in that calendar year. You select them, you go to data and export, and you get a spreadsheet. And then you make it look as pretty as you want before you give it to ecology. It's going to change slightly as we implement our new system, because the information won't all be housed on the main work order. We'll have that illicit discharge inspection attached to it. On the front end, our IT department will have to develop an SSRS or a SQL Server report. And then once that report is developed, it'll just be as simple as opening that report, putting in the parameters you want to search for, whatever calendar year you're reporting on, and then running the report. And then it'll give you a spreadsheet like this. So it'll be a pretty simple process still. So what can you do with this data you've been collecting for the last 6 years? Ecology's implementing this new reporting requirement so that way they can analyze it, but it's something that we can also do on our local level. So this is one way to look at the data you've been collecting over the years. This is looking at the number of IDDE inspections and work orders versus all of our surface water inspections and work orders. We can see a correlation between there are fewer work orders than there are inspections. And that's because a work order will typically have multiple inspections associated with it. We see the same type of correlation with our IDDE work orders and inspections until this year. So this year, we'll see that there's a much larger number of work orders than there are inspections, and I'm going to talk about that in the next slide. So when looking at the breakdown of our illicit connection and illicit discharge work orders at the top half, and then the bottom half is looking at the type of assets that had pollutants present during an inspection. Over the years, we've typically just been utilizing our illicit discharge investigation work order. And this year, I decided to start using our illicit connection elimination work order to distinguish between the two types of investigations that we're doing. So although it's not necessarily always going to be an illicit connection elimination, it's more of an illicit connection investigation, I wanted to be able to distinguish between those two so we can better look at our data in the coming years. So that's looking at that. You'll notice at the top, the very top part of the graph, there's the illicit discharge screening work order. And the reason why there's only one of those is because we use our O&M inspections as our screening methodology. And I'll talk about why there is that one in 2017 in a few slides. On the bottom half, you can see that for the most part, it's catch basins that are being impacted by illicit discharges. So this map is another way you can visualize and look at and analyze your data. This is looking at all of the IDDE service requests, which are in diamonds, and work orders, which are in circles, in 2017. And that's looking at how they are distributed across the city by basin. You'll see that there was a much higher number of service requests than work orders in 2017, and that's because up until this year, we didn't always generate a work order when a service request came in. So for instance, if our waste management provider had a spill where, let's say their hose had a failure and they discharged a cup of hydraulic fluid to the pavement, they cleaned it up, no storm drains were impacted, their practice is to call the Department of Ecology and to call the city. And so a service request would be created in that instance, but the city didn't have to respond or investigate that any further, so we would have just closed out that service request. This year, in trying to prepare ourselves for the new permit coming online this summer, we've started to just automatically generate a work order and fill out some of that additional information that we'll be required to report. So this is looking specifically at those work orders in 2017, and it's then breaking it down by the source tracing method, which for us is almost always a visual ID. And it's looking at a breakdown of the materials identified by basin. So this will be helpful for us in implementing the new education and outreach requirements in the new permit, because it gives us some local water quality data that we can use to possibly inform our education and outreach efforts. For example, we can see in McAleer Creek that there was a much higher incidence of vehicle fluids than other types of materials, so maybe we would do some targeted outreach to that basin when it comes to vehicle maintenance. Another way we can use our data, since everything is linked together and it's all housed in one location, you can zoom in on one portion of the map and you can do a search of activity that's happened there. So if I zoom in on the map and I click on this wrench, it'll automatically open the tab on the left, which it wouldn't look like this. It would just show a search window and it'll have the XY coordinates automatically populated based on where I'm zoomed in on the map. Run a search, and it gives me all of the types of work orders that have occurred in that location. So I can look and see that there have been 5 illicit discharge investigation work orders in that area. I happen to know that a few of them were from the same business. So we ended up creating that one illicit discharge screening work order, so that way we know that we need to go back and check on that business periodically to see if we observe that, that discharge taking place, like it's been reported a few times. And then we've also been able to do some targeted pollution prevention business outreach to those businesses. So, in summary, utilizing Cityworks as our asset management software has allowed us to house all of our information in one location, and all of that's able to be linked together, so that's allowed for better coordination within our city departments. For example, our surface water utility manager, she'll actually go into Cityworks, and if a business is coming in for a pre-application meeting, she'll look to see if there's been any illicit discharge investigations at that business, to be able to know if that there's something that they need to address during their redevelopment. It also has allowed for coordination in our damage restitution process, in code enforcement. You have record of repeat offenses at a property. It's in code enforcement, and our damage restitution covers multiple departments within the city as well. It also, just having it all in one spot increases our visibility of our data, and it's going to make it easier for us to implement the new permit, because it'll help inform our stormwater management action planning. As I already mentioned, it gives us some local water quality information to help inform our education and outreach program. We've been able to do some targeted pollution prevention site visits, and it'll help us be able to do some targeted business source control inspections once that inspection program comes online with the new permit as well. All right, any questions? Yeah, Stella.